Ferrari is suffering from a huge issue that Hamilton has revealed. Red Bull makes a big promise for the 2026 engine and all the latest F1 news. Picture this. You're a Formula One team, spending millions on the latest aerodynamics, hiring the best engineers, pushing every boundary for speed. Then you get disqualified from qualifying because your measuring tool was wrong. That's exactly what happened to Williams at the Singapore Grand Prix, and what their investigation revealed is absolutely shocking. What started as a simple technical violation turned into a wake-up call that exposed fundamental problems within one of Formula One's most historic teams. Today, we're diving deep into Williams' Singapore nightmare and what it tells us about the brutal reality of modern Formula One. Let me paint you the picture of what went down in Singapore. Both Williams cars sailed through qualifying with decent performances. Carlos Sainz locked in 13th place, Alex Albon grabbed 12th. Nothing spectacular, but solid grid positions that could translate into valuable championship points. Then came the post-qualifying technical inspection, and everything fell apart. The FIA officials discovered that Williams' rear-wing DRS system exceeded the maximum permitted gap of 85 millimeters. Not by much, mind you, but in Formula One, being illegal by even a fraction is still illegal. Both cars were immediately thrown out of qualifying results. Here's where it gets interesting though. Williams had actually measured their own wing before qualifying and believed it was completely legal. They had gone through their standard procedures, used their measurement tools, and everything checked out fine. So how did they get it so wrong? This is where Williams team principal James Vowles comes in with his brutal honesty. Instead of making excuses or pointing fingers, Vowles ordered what he calls a complete dig down into what went wrong. What they found was genuinely alarming. The investigation revealed that multiple systems within Williams were either completely missing, severely outdated, or simply not up to current standards. Even worse, the very tool they used to measure DRS compliance didn't properly match the official FIA tool. Imagine that for a moment. You're competing in the pinnacle of motorsport, where millimeters matter, and your measuring equipment isn't even calibrated to match the official standard. But this DRS measurement failure was just the tip of the iceberg. Vowles revealed that some elements of Williams' infrastructure are literally 20 years out of date. 20 years. In a sport where technology evolves monthly, Williams has been operating with systems from the early 2000s. Think about that timeline. When some of Williams' current tools were cutting edge, Lewis Hamilton hadn't even made his Formula One debut. Michael Schumacher was still dominating with Ferrari. The iPhone didn't exist. That's how far behind Williams had fallen. The root cause traces back to the final years under the Williams family ownership, when investment in infrastructure essentially stopped. The team was hemorrhaging money, struggling to compete, and basic facility upgrades became unaffordable luxuries. They were stuck in survival mode, while rivals invested billions in state-of-the-art facilities. When Doralton Capital bought Williams in 2020, they inherited this massive infrastructure deficit. But here's the cruel irony. Just as new ownership arrived with money to invest, Formula One introduced the cost cap. Suddenly, teams were limited in how much they could spend annually, making it incredibly difficult to catch up on decades of missed investment. Williams actually tried to get special dispensation to increase their capital expenditure allowance, which would have let them upgrade their facilities faster. But rival teams blocked this proposal. Why would Mercedes or Red Bull want to help a competitor close the infrastructure gap they'd spent years building? This Singapore incident perfectly illustrates the brutal catch-22 facing Williams. They need to invest in basic systems and tools just to avoid technical violations, but the cost cap limits how quickly they can modernize. Meanwhile, they're losing valuable championship points due to avoidable mistakes that better-equipped teams would never make. The human cost of this infrastructure deficit is enormous. Carlos Sainz, who had qualified 13th, was relegated to starting 18th and managed to fight back to 10th place. That's a testament to his driving skill, but imagine the points he might have scored starting from his original grid position. Alex Albon's situation was even worse, starting from the pit lane and finishing 14th completely out of the points. In Formula One's current competitive landscape, every point matters enormously. Constructors' championship positions determine prize money distribution, with millions of dollars separating each place in the standings. Missing out on points due to preventable technical violations isn't just embarrassing, it's financially devastating. What makes this story even more compelling is Val's refreshing transparency about Williams' situation. Many team principals would have downplayed the incident or blamed external factors. Instead, Val's openly admitted that Williams has a long way to go before reaching championship level and acknowledged that this was just one of thousands of potential technical tests they need to pass. This level of honesty is rare in Formula One's typically polished corporate environment, but it also signals something important about Williams' new direction. By openly acknowledging their weaknesses, they're creating accountability and setting realistic expectations for their rebuilding process. The Singapore investigation ultimately revealed that Williams isn't just fighting for better lap times or aerodynamic efficiency. They're fighting to meet the basic operational standards expected of a modern Formula One team. It's a sobering reminder that success in Formula One isn't just about having fast drivers or clever engineers, but about having the fundamental infrastructure to operate at the sport's demanding technical standards. For Williams fans, this story is both frustrating and oddly encouraging. Frustrating because it shows how far behind they've fallen, but encouraging because it demonstrates new management's commitment to identifying and addressing these fundamental issues rather than papering over them. What if I told you that one of Formula One's greatest champions just revealed the secret weapon behind Ferrari's future success? Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion who shocked the motorsport world by leaving Mercedes for the iconic Italian team, has just given us an unprecedented look inside Ferrari's inner workings. And what he's discovered might surprise you more than his move to Maranello itself. Picture this. It's 2025, and one of the most decorated drivers in Formula One history is struggling to find his first podium with Ferrari. The season hasn't gone according to plan. No race wins for the Scuderia. Questions swirling about whether Hamilton made the right choice. But instead of panic or regret, Hamilton is pointing to one man as the reason he's more confident than ever about Ferrari's future. That man? Fred Vasseur, Ferrari's team principal. Now you might be thinking, what's so special about a team boss supporting his star driver? Every team principal says nice things about their drivers, right? But here's where it gets fascinating. Hamilton isn't just talking about generic support or media-friendly soundbites. He's revealing something much deeper about Vasseur's character and approach that goes back nearly 2 decades. The story actually begins long before Hamilton ever wore Ferrari red. Back in the early 2000s, when Hamilton was just a young driver climbing through the junior categories, he worked with Vasseur's team. This wasn't some brief encounter either. Hamilton won both his Formula 3 and GP2 championships under Vasseur's guidance. So when Hamilton describes Vasseur's support as incredible, he's speaking from years of experience, not just a few months in 2025. But here's what makes this relationship truly unique in the cutthroat world of Formula One. According to Hamilton, Vasseur hasn't changed one bit in all these years. Think about that for a moment. In nearly 2 decades, through different teams, different pressures, different levels of success and failure, Vasseur has remained exactly the same person. Hamilton even jokes that Vasseur still wears the same clothes he did back then. This consistency isn't just about personal style, though. It reveals something profound about Vasseur's character and leadership philosophy. In a sport where people often change their approach based on politics, pressure, or personal gain, Vasseur has stayed true to his core principles. And what are those principles? Hamilton gives us the answer. It's all about car performance. Here's where the story gets really interesting. Hamilton explains that while other teams he worked with in the lower categories focused their spending on various areas, sometimes prioritizing marketing, facilities, or other flashy elements, Vasseur was laser-focused on what actually makes cars go faster. Aerodynamics, performance, the technical stuff that wins races but doesn't always make headlines. This focus on substance over style is exactly what Hamilton admires most about Vasseur. He describes the Frenchman as a straight shooter and a massive competitor. These aren't just nice character traits in Formula One. They're essential qualities for building a championship-winning team. In a sport filled with politics and mind games, having a leader who cuts through the noise and focuses on what really matters is invaluable. Now, let's talk about why this matters for Ferrari's future. The 2025 season hasn't been the dream debut Hamilton hoped for. Ferrari sits third in the Constructors' Championship, trailing Mercedes by 27 points. Hamilton is still chasing his first Ferrari podium. For a driver who's used to winning, and a team with Ferrari's history and expectations, this could easily create tension and finger-pointing. Instead, Hamilton is taking a remarkably mature and strategic view of the situation. He openly acknowledges that it hasn't been a perfect year, but he's framing these struggles as valuable learning experiences. More importantly, he's saying he'd rather have these growing pains now, when they're not fighting for a championship, than later when every point matters. This perspective reveals something crucial about both Hamilton and Vasseur's approach. They're playing the long game. They understand that building a championship-winning team takes time, patience, and the ability to learn from setbacks. Every race is providing data and insights that will make them stronger in the future. Hamilton describes the current Ferrari team as more solid and united than ever before. This is significant because unity is often the first casualty when results don't meet expectations. The fact that Hamilton feels this way, despite the challenging season, speaks volumes about Vasseur's leadership and the culture he's building at Ferrari. The trust between Hamilton and Vasseur runs so deep that Hamilton can see past the immediate results to the bigger picture. He recognizes that Vasseur's unwavering focus on car performance, the same quality he admired 20 years ago, is exactly what Ferrari needs to return to the top of Formula One. Ferrari clearly shares this confidence in Vasseur. Despite reports questioning his future, the team doubled down by signing him to a new multi-year contract during the summer. This wasn't just a vote of confidence, it was a statement that Ferrari believes in Vasseur's vision and approach. What makes this story even more compelling is how it challenges our assumptions about success in Formula One. We're used to seeing immediate results, quick fixes, and constant changes when things don't go according to plan. But Hamilton and Vasseur are showing us a different path. They're demonstrating that sometimes the best foundation for future success is built during the most challenging moments. The relationship between Hamilton and Vasseur represents something special in modern Formula One. It's built on genuine respect, shared history, and aligned values. Hamilton isn't just driving for Vasseur, he's believing in him. And that belief, based on nearly 2 decades of knowing each other, might just be the secret ingredient that eventually brings Ferrari back to championship glory. So while 2025 might not have delivered the immediate success everyone hoped for, it's laying the groundwork for something potentially much bigger. With Hamilton's experience and Vasseur's unwavering focus on performance, Ferrari might be building something truly special. Sometimes the most important victories happen long before anyone crosses the finish line first. What if I told you that one driver's decision could completely reshape the 2026 Formula One Championship before a single lap is even run? Carlos Sainz just dropped a bombshell that has every F1 fan talking and could signal the beginning of a new era in motorsport. The Spanish driver recently made a stunning admission that's sending shockwaves through the paddock. When asked about his controversial move from Ferrari to Williams, Sainz revealed something that nobody saw coming. The Mercedes power unit wasn't just a factor in his decision, it was one of the main reasons he chose Williams over other potential suitors. Now, before you dismiss this as just another driver trying to justify a questionable career move, let me explain why this revelation is absolutely massive for the future of Formula One. We're not just talking about a driver switch here. We're talking about a chess move that could position Sainz at the center of F1's biggest regulatory shakeup in decades. Picture this scenario. It's 2014 all over again. Formula One introduces new hybrid power units, and suddenly Mercedes dominates everything in sight. 7 consecutive drivers' championships for their powered cars. 8 constructors' titles. Complete and utter domination that lasted nearly a decade. Sound familiar? That's exactly what Sainz is betting on happening again in 2026. The 2026 regulations represent the most dramatic change Formula One has seen in its entire history. We're talking about engines that will split power 50-50 between traditional combustion and electrical energy. That's a 300% increase in battery power compared to what we see today. These aren't just tweaks to existing technology. This is a complete reinvention of how Formula One cars will generate speed. Here's where it gets really interesting. Sainz isn't just gambling on Mercedes getting the engine right. He's making a calculated bet based on historical precedent. The last time Formula One introduced revolutionary engine regulations, Mercedes absolutely nailed it, while their competitors fumbled around for years trying to catch up. Ferrari struggled. Red Bull's Renault partnership crumbled. Honda was nowhere to be found. Only Mercedes had the formula figured out from day one. But Sainz knows something that casual observers might miss. Having a great engine is only half the battle. When 2026 arrives, 4 different teams will be running Mercedes power units. Mercedes themselves, obviously. McLaren, who are currently fighting for championships. Alpine, who are trying to rebuild their reputation. And Williams, Sainz's new home. This creates an absolutely fascinating dynamic. Imagine 4 teams with identical power advantages, but completely different chassis philosophies and engineering approaches. It's like giving 4 different architects the same foundation and asking them to build skyscrapers. The results could be wildly different, and that's exactly what Sainz is counting on. Williams might seem like an odd choice on paper. They've struggled for years, bouncing around the bottom half of the grid, while their glory days seem like ancient history. But here's what most people don't understand about team trajectories in Formula One. Williams has already shown dramatic improvement this season, jumping from 9th place to 5th in the Constructors' Championship. In F1 terms, that's not just progress, that's a rocket ship trajectory. Sainz sees something that others might be missing. While McLaren and Mercedes will be obvious targets for every competitor, Williams could be flying under the radar. They're building momentum, developing infrastructure, and positioning themselves for the exact moment when everything changes. It's the perfect underdog story waiting to happen. The really clever part of Sainz's strategy becomes clear when you consider the alternatives. Ferrari will always be competitive. Sainz knows this better than anyone after spending years in red. But Ferrari will also be developing their own power unit, taking on massive technical risks, while Mercedes focuses purely on perfecting their proven approach. Aston Martin has their Honda partnership, which adds another layer of uncertainty to an already complex equation. By choosing Williams and Mercedes power, Sainz is essentially placing 2 bets simultaneously. First, that Mercedes will repeat their 2014 engine dominance. Second, that Williams will execute better than McLaren and Alpine when it comes to chassis development and race strategy. It's a double-or-nothing approach that could either look brilliant or disastrous depending on how 2026 unfolds. The timing couldn't be more perfect either. Sainz's multi-year contract extends specifically into the 2026 season, meaning he'll be locked in exactly when the new regulations take effect. While other drivers might be scrambling for seats or adjusting to new teams, Sainz will have years of Williams experience under his belt and complete familiarity with Mercedes' power characteristics. What makes this even more intriguing is Sainz's confidence level. This isn't desperate gamble from a driver running out of options. This is calculated strategy from someone who clearly believes Williams and Mercedes have inside information about 2026 that others don't possess. Remember, Sainz had conversations with almost every team on the grid. He could have chosen stability elsewhere, but instead, he chose potential. The broader implications extend far beyond just Sainz's career trajectory. If he's right about Mercedes and Williams, we could be looking at a complete reshuffling of Formula One's competitive order. Imagine Williams returning to championship contention after decades in the wilderness. Picture McLaren and Williams fighting for victories, while traditional powerhouses like Red Bull and Ferrari struggle with new regulations. This decision represents everything that makes Formula One fascinating. It's part sporting excellence, part technological gamble, part pure instinct about where the sport is heading. Sainz isn't just changing teams, He's positioning himself at the center of Formula One's next great evolution. Whether this bold strategy pays off remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. Carlos Sainz has just made 2026 infinitely more interesting for every Formula One fan on the planet. Picture this. You wake up one morning thinking you've had a decent race weekend, only to discover that a few millimeters of missing carbon fiber have completely derailed your entire season. That's exactly what happened to Ferrari back in April, and the shocking truth is, they're still paying the price today. What I'm about to reveal will change how you think about Formula One's technical regulations forever. The Chinese Grand Prix seemed like a typical weekend for Ferrari until disaster struck in the most unexpected way. Lewis Hamilton had just crossed the finish line in 6th place, probably already thinking about the points he'd secured for the team. Charles Leclerc finished his race too, both drivers believing they'd contributed valuable championship points. But then came the bombshell that would haunt Ferrari for months. Post-race scrutiny revealed that Hamilton's car had a floor plank measuring just 8.6 millimeters thick instead of the mandatory 9 millimeters. To put that in perspective, we're talking about a difference smaller than the width of a paperclip. Yet this tiny discrepancy was enough to strip Hamilton of his 6th place finish entirely. But wait, it gets worse. Leclerc's car was also thrown out, but for being underweight. In one crushing moment, Ferrari went from scoring decent points to walking away with absolutely nothing. Now here's where this story takes a fascinating turn. Most teams would dust themselves off and move on after such a setback. But Ferrari's response reveals something much deeper about how modern Formula One actually works. Team principal Fred Vasseur recently admitted something that should send chills down every racing fan's spine. Ferrari is still leaving what he calls a margin of safety more than half a season later. Think about what this really means. In a sport where milliseconds determine victory or defeat, where every team is fighting for every 10th of a second of lap time, Ferrari is deliberately making their car slower to avoid another technical violation. Vasseur himself explained that these ground effect cars are incredibly sensitive to ride height, with every single millimeter translating to a position change on the starting grid. When you're forced to run your car higher than optimal, you're essentially volunteering to be less competitive. The psychological impact goes far beyond just technical adjustments. Vasseur confessed that the disqualification completely threw Ferrari off their development trajectory for the entire season. They had to shift focus from pure performance gains to ensuring they stayed within the regulations. This isn't just about being conservative. It's about fundamentally changing your entire approach to car development because one weekend went wrong. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable. Ferrari's situation perfectly illustrates the knife-edge nature of modern Formula One. Vasseur emphasized that everything revolves around aerodynamic platform stability, and teams have been prioritizing predictability over raw downforce for 2 years now. When you lose confidence in your ability to control something as basic as your car's ride height, it affects every single decision you make moving forward. The financial implications are staggering when you consider the bigger picture. Ferrari currently sits 3rd in the Constructors' Championship with 298 points, trailing Mercedes by 27 points, but holding an 8-point advantage over Red Bull. In Formula One's prize money structure, every championship position is worth millions of dollars. The Chinese Grand Prix disqualification didn't just cost them points that weekend, it potentially cost them millions in prize money and damaged their development program for months. What's particularly striking is how Vasseur describes the cascade effect. He mentioned that early in the season, Ferrari struggled with handling issues at various racetracks, then faced quality problems, followed by the disqualifications. He used a phrase that should terrify any team principal: "We lost the thread a bit." In Formula One, losing your development thread even briefly can set you back for an entire season or longer. The human element of this story is equally compelling. Lewis Hamilton himself confirmed in Japan that the disqualification had a knock-on effect and that Ferrari was running their cars higher than they wanted. Imagine being a driver of Hamilton's caliber, knowing that your car is deliberately set up to be slower than it could be because of regulatory fears. That's gotta mess with your head during qualifying and races. Ferrari's approach to solving this problem reveals the complexity of modern Formula One engineering. Rather than chasing pure downforce numbers, they've spent 2 years focusing on what Vasseur calls good drivability and predictability. They're trying to eliminate the downforce fluctuations that occur when wheels turn or when the car experiences roll and pitch movements. It's incredibly sophisticated engineering work, but it all stems from that one devastating weekend in China. The broader lesson here extends beyond just Ferrari. Vasseur made a fascinating observation about their championship rivals McLaren, noting that McLaren doesn't have some secret weapon worth 0.3 of a second. Instead, they excel across 10 different areas, each contributing about 20 milliseconds of lap time improvement. This reveals the modern Formula One reality, 2-. Success comes from perfecting countless small details, not finding one magic solution. Looking ahead, Ferrari faces a crucial period with 6 races remaining in the championship. They're locked in an intense battle with Mercedes and Red Bull for podium positions in the constructors' standings, while McLaren has already secured the championship. Every point matters enormously, and the psychological scars from China continue influencing their decisions. Vasseur's closing thoughts provide the perfect perspective on Ferrari's situation. He emphasized that believing you've reached your goal would mark the beginning of the end, and that there's no magic solution coming to suddenly transform their fortunes. They must maintain their methodical approach of improving across all disciplines. The Chinese Grand Prix disqualification story proves that in Formula One, the smallest technical violations can have consequences lasting an entire season. Ferrari's ongoing struggle with this setback demonstrates how the sport's technical regulations create a constant balancing act between performance and compliance, where even the most successful teams can find themselves fundamentally compromised by millimeters of missing material.